Welcome to the public defense of my PhD entitled Product Service System Design. The Department of Product Development is part of the Faculty of Design Science. So it only seems fair to address that shortly in my presentation. Design science embraces the theory of design and the act of designing. It recognizes laws of design and its activities, develops rules and procedures, and explicitly organizes a rational, systematic approach to design. It utilizes scientific knowledge of artifacts, and design is also a scientific activity in itself. Under the big umbrella of design science, we use design research as a means to contribute to the field. And it investigates three types of design knowledge. First is the study of design practices and processes of design. The study of designerly ways of knowing is a second, and thirdly, the study of form and configuration. I will go a little bit in detail. The first, we also call design praxeology. We develop and applicate processes, tools and techniques that aid the designer. Secondly, design epistemology is about how people design, how they learn to design, and how to nurture this in design education. Thirdly, design phenomenology. The design contains knowledge and embodies design attributes. For our design research, we have a problem statement as such formulated in the increasingly blurring boundaries between products and services nowadays, harsh competition on customer value, and more complex societal issues force companies each day to a more integrated logic. Our assumption is that product service systems and the design of it can provide the boundary conditions and a tailored approach for the transition to go successfully. The playing field of PSS is differently than product design or service design before. Doing it separately, designing product service systems, you look at a broader spectrum. It's a little bit more complex and we need the necessary collaboration. And decisions need to be made on each organizational level. Therefore, it's important that every transition goes with change and in the need of the right strategic mindset and managerial style to coordinate and facilitate the design process. Specifically relevant for PSS because in the past, practice shows that exploration and the service side of innovation remains largely under-addressed. Therefore, exploration is about understanding the context, its stakeholders, relationships, interactions, values between products, services, people, their environment, and in the end also society. If you take two steps back, in order to explore your solution spaces, in order to jump further with a better focus, we can design with much more meaning in people's daily lives. For this design research, we use different focal points. First of them is the front end of innovation. Sometimes, to the outside world, it looks a little bit fuzzy because it's really complex. But in the end, what we try to do is make decisions that have impact on both product and service, and not something in the end. Like for form giving and styling or usability aspects, we can also have an impact really early stage. So we try to structure it. And where I put my focus is at the end of front end of innovation, right before new product development or even commercialization starts. The second focus is the user experience. If we want to improve aspects of people's lives, we have to keep the user experience at the focus of every effort in design. People are looking for a story that stimulates the mind, amazes their senses, and touches their hearts every time, without any. A third focus point is the synthesis approach. When we look at innovation literature, when integrating the service, a first approach was the assimilation approach. And they look at services in the same way, using the same methods and tools as they do for product development and design. This is called assimilation. The second approach, quite understandably, is demarcation. The people from the service side told us, well, we have an own definition. We have our own tools, we have a unique set of characteristics, and a service is not a product. It's completely different. But Since products, services are not sold all independently anymore, usually they go hand in hand as experiences or solutions on the market. People don't see the difference. They see it as a complete offer. That's why a third approach is the synthesis approach, the one which we follow in this design research. And it might bring new elements to the surface that were not apparent on the levels below. We emphasize the context, the whole, and its mutual relationships. The cover of my PhD, it has a meaning. On the left side, the square signifies the product. On the right side, the circle signifies the pure service. But with the methodology of product, service, system design, the methodology, it molds the product and the service into a synthetic thing. It is modular, you can recalibrate it, and you can work in both ways. The service becomes the product, and the product becomes the service as one. Research question: how to strengthen and advance this synthesis? Well, we studied the preconditions relevant for an integrated process. We developed a toolkit, validated the knowledge in the context of design education, and explored the knowledge related to the design and the representation. How did we do this? Well, we do a research design, and we follow a procedural approach. Specifically for design research, it's a really systematic approach for our research. We have a first research cycle and 4 following research cycles. The first one follows 6 steps, an explorative and a confirmative phase, in which we do a literature review and expert interviews. And in the end, it results in a mindset, the right support, and the preconditions for the PSS design process, systematically combining literature and expert interviews. A second one is design inclusive research. Opposed to the one before, this is doing research in the context of design. This one includes the design into the research process itself. We did 4 research cycles after each other, and every time we do the design, we prototype it, we get feedback, and we refine the results. We take it back into a new developed toolkit, and each time it gets tested really thoroughly. In total, this was my entire research design for the couple of last years. Systematically combining literature and the interviews contextualized and strengthened our knowledge on PSS as a phenomenon. PSS design is more than a combination of just products and services. The product service indicates that value comes significantly from the product as it does significantly come from the service. And the system emphasizes the whole. When talking to experts, when doing the literature review, we saw several transition dynamics and pathways that companies already do undertake. Companies coming from the product side are adding services to their offering. We call that servitization. But service providers like banks or insurance companies, they try to attach products to their offering, which we call productization. On the vertical axis, on the top side, you can see a goods dominant logic, but this actually goes down towards a service dominant logic, which means innovation through a service transition that places the user perspective central as a motivation for innovation. Now, it's not necessary to go to one side. The sweet spot is actually in the middle, an integrated logic. And what does that integrated logic stand for? PSS design opens up the knowledge and empathizes with the user and the context. It strengthens, professionalizes, and supports innovation processes and makes it more adept to the multiplicity of trends. We do this in the early strategy making, so PSS are more complex and are broader. And we try to involve the company in a more human-centered, meaningful innovation. And lastly, it implies a mindset and formalizes, establishes a vision for strategy that understands the different levels and perspectives on value, integrating product and service seamlessly. It resulted in 21 conditions, a mindset, something that, like prescriptions for management in which they can support in the best way the design process of product service systems. Here you can see the front end of innovation. It has 3 big phases: understand, explore, and define. And for each stage, on the side, you can see the 21 preconditions, things they have to think about when formulating the strategy, choosing for product service systems. When taking this along the stages in each front end of innovation stage, we know exactly how to support the design of PSS. But the experts told us it's really nice to have valuable prescriptions for management and strategy, but we are not designing product service systems yet. So we designed the toolkit to help designers or companies to design these product service systems themselves. Our main question here was, are we building the toolkit right? We were able to try this out in a course called IPO Project Integrated Systems, a course of 12 credits in the first master year of product development. 12 credits means 360 hours for one student, more or less. In groups of 3, students do about 1,000 hours. Imagine that you have 10 or 20 groups working on these kind of complex issues. You have a lot of information. Interesting to follow the designer, observe his way of going through the process and using the PSS design toolkit that was used as a prototype. And on the right side, you can see how the toolkit changed over time. We got feedback from the students, we got feedback from the companies, the expert panel that we worked with, design agencies. So, in the end, after 4 iterations on the toolkit, we came up with a similar framework that uses the same stages of the front end of innovation, understand, explore, and define, but instead of the preconditions on the side, you can see all the tools and techniques that the students are using to get the job done. But a second question is, are we building the right toolkit? So we took 2 methods, one quantitative, one qualitative. The first one, Creativity Support Index, is a means to look into 6 factors that support creativity when using the PSS design toolkit. One of them is collaboration. Really important for PSS because there's a lot of stakeholders, the organizations, the end users. We have to talk to a lot of people across disciplines and in fields. Collaboration is also necessary within the company, in the group itself. Designing PSS is not something you do on a daily basis. It's a hard job. So let's hope people enjoy using the toolkit. Exploration was for us radically important because we need to explore solution spaces and go for maybe sometimes a little bit more radical approach. Different ideas, alternatives. There's one truth, but the opposite truth has the same value. Expressiveness. We want to be able to represent our designs with prototypes, with sketches, and in words, of course. But it has to be done to convey our message to other people. Immersion is about being absorbed in the activity, in the context. Sometimes the students are too busy with the tools as a deliverable. Are we doing it right? We're getting the grades, and it's difficult to get immersed. Results worth effort. At the end of this huge project, we hope that the students are satisfied with the results, with the amount of effort that they have put in. Now what we saw is that it sheds light, this quantitative metric, on the creative support factors that are the most important when engaging in PSS design. And collaboration, exploration, expressiveness, and results worth effort came out as the most important. Specifically, exploration scored the highest. But to triangulate our results from this quantitative metric, we did a post-inquiry. So after 1.5 years later, after the project ended, we asked the students to look back on their project and reflect on what they did. We had a lot of questions. I'm going to show you 4. The first is, where would you situate your project on this scale? This is a product service system continuum. 1 is a pure physical product. 10 is a pure service. But as you can see from the 109 students that responded, everybody is somewhere balanced out in the product service system continuum. Second question, choose one of the factors below from the creativity support index from the other metric which one supported you the most in your project? A nice to have is again the exploration. Almost everyone goes for this one. But a second and very interesting one is the immersion. Because when the students are using the tools in another project or for their master thesis as a graduation project, they don't think about the tools anymore because the knowledge is internalized and they get absorbed in the context pretty fast. Suppose you did not use the PSS design toolkit. Would you be able to achieve the same result? 70 out of 109 said no, we wouldn't. And as a last question, to what extent have your skills improved as a designer because of the toolkit? No change in skills. Tremendous change in skills. You can see a trend line. It says enough. 2 cases of the 66 from 197 students were developed in the IPO project using the PSS design toolkit. Later, I will go more in detail. This is the one. A first concept is Grant C. Some of the designer students are here in the room. I hope to tell it right. The context was about grandparents. There are some grandparents here in the room as well. And interestingly about it is that they want to connect more frequently and more meaningful with their grandchildren, opposed to the functional visits, also known as babysit. So we want to do it differently. Grandchildren, what they noticed is that they love to snoop around in the house, on the attic, or in the cellar of the grandparents. They like to seek old pictures, artifacts that are interesting, and discover things like adventurous. But what if the grandparents live in an apartment or live at a care facility? They don't have the room and space to store all these kind of artifacts. So what the students did, they designed a service system like a library, a second-hand store, with all types of artifacts, old pictures, old stories, easy to tell with grandchildren and to share and experience together and to play. The product is actually a birdhouse, and the birdhouse stands at the house of the grandchildren, and it lights when the grandparents have hidden something. A new discovery will start. Game on. The grandchildren, they want to go as quickly to the grandparents as possible, so the product serves as a mediator and supports the service. If you think about it, at the grandparents' house, the birds wait for the grandchildren to start the game. When they arrive, they can play together, go and find the artifact that was hidden, and stories can be told. Also, the grandchildren can play to the brother and the sister, or they can hide something themselves, and grandparents start searching as well. Lovely. The second is Chef Cot, completely different. Here the context is about the years at a university and the students' eating habits. Think about you as parents. Those eating habits will probably be worse than we have even imagined. So the student group tried to design something differently. The idea was to make them understand food trails again. Where does our food come from? Appreciate healthy food, making it affordable as well, because healthy food frequently is a little bit more expensive. So they tried to make the students being part of a circular concept. Food processing, food delivery, providing shelf space in your own refrigerator at your cot. Everything is possible. And of course, the eating experience itself. The application allows for personalization, and the product learns the students how to cook because they can use this right before eating for cooking purposes and other. And the circular concept thinks about the sustainability as well. In the end, it's important because if you look at this, the customer journey where the students go through, the students are part of the product service system itself. Anyhow, from all the other 66 cases, together with these two, we can see a clear conclusion. There is an end of the verbal discourse because in the beginning people are writing something on post-its. They're working with words when they do observations and interviews. But at a specific point, words translate into representations, sketches, prototypes, everything else but words. Why? To formalize the front end of innovation. We try to visualize explicitly what happens in this fuzzy stage. This is not fuzzy anymore, and it enables communication and collaboration with all stakeholders. It ultimately, like I told you, resulted in this design toolkit. At first, we started with a prototype. It looked the same. It had an ISBN number. Everybody, even companies, worked with it, thinking it was the real deal. But it was just a prototype. It was the design inclusive research. We took this prototype into the teaching experiment. Everybody was working with it. We got feedback from the expert panel, the students, companies outside. But having a professional side, we also needed an academic side. And we actually went for a GPRC label, which is a heavy review on guaranteed peer review. So the content was also addressed with high academic standards. Some of the review comments were that the methodology worked successfully for a 360-degree approach. Also, non-designers can be in this process. And wicked problems that companies daily face are also included. To look a little bit more in detail on what the design process looks like, again, these 3 stages of the front end of innovation: understand, explore, and define. And all the specific methods, tools, and techniques are listed on the site that the students or people can use from every organization. Understand. During this phase, we get insights into the needs, expectations, and interactions between all the stakeholders, people that are affecting the context and others affected by it. We use techniques to make sense of the context, to reframe or change the problem statement or the design challenge. We cluster promising patterns and try to intervene in the current system to go towards a future state system. And the representation of all this enables us to discuss, interact, and create a holistic understanding of the design challenge we have. The second phase is explore. Here we try to create solution spaces for the system and its parts, usually parts that do not yet exist. Idea generation is on the intangible part of the system, but also on the tangibles. We explore front and backstage interaction, which means things we can see and things we cannot see behind the scenes, but are really important for the company, but not so much for the user. And at the end, PSS scenarios help us to discuss on operational validity with the company. Which resources do we have, and can we really do this? Can we take out the service or the product or do something else? And we can also discuss the value with the users. Last stage, define. Here we translate abstract user requirements, organizational and societal needs into concrete design attributes. It's important to understand which product and service part has to be understood by whom. And by that, its visual compositions are a start for prototyping. And we use an increasingly level of fidelity, meaning that we can start from cardboard and ending up with nice Arduino sets. Defining tasks, responsibilities, and benefits at the end are important because we try to verify the interest of the users, promote a final solution, and see if the company can really work with this and knows exactly what to do. Prototypes are learning material. Services can also be prototyped. Later on, they become the showcase of the end result. But still, this is only front end of innovation. We haven't developed anything yet. This is a way to retrieve feedback at a really early stage. But we integrated research cycle 1 on the preconditions, the 21 really important conditions that we need for an integrated process for the right support of the design process. But what is interesting is that exactly the same framework is applied to the PSS design toolkit. You can use the preconditions in unison with the tools and techniques of the designer. And when using these two frameworks, you can read it in both ways. The theory behind product service systems, what experts have been telling us during their projects, how the toolkit addresses the situations and which tools to use. So product and service designers know exactly what it means on a strategic level, and at a strategic level, they know exactly how to support the design. Synthesis. Our conclusions are a way to contribute to the field of design science, and we formulate them as follows. A first contribution to the logic, design process, and preconditions. It could be used as a checklist, a discussion tool of what is currently in place and still relevant after some time. we can really recalibrate the offering. With exploration, we draw from the same set of resources as exploitation, yet it asks for a completely different mindset and management style. A contribution to the design process. The ability to know how to go to the design process is as much valued as the outcome. A second important trait is to postpone a definitive choice of design ideas. Going through the process, every time new prospects are opened up, new ideas come. So don't hang with the first idea. Contribution to design education. There's a significant change in skill set of the designer. And second of all, the systemic lens, seeing the whole picture, gives our designers a wider responsibility to society, taking into account sustainability, the economics, sociology, and psychology. A contribution to design and representation. People that go through the PSS Design Toolkit, they can demonstrate intangible value as much as they can demonstrate tangible value. They can communicate the whole and its complexity to stakeholders and across fields. They can handle different levels of abstraction simultaneously, and really important for the field, a client, the companies, can see the value of the discovery phase, which was before fuzzy, but now is pretty clear represented. Otherwise, this value would be discounted and a waste of resources. I think for the front end of innovation and designers, an important trait. To end with a focus on exploration in PSS design, we introduce a logic that guides people and organizations through the process of imagining and envisioning what the future value proposition might be. Thank you for your attention.